Move, cripple, 2 words, thrown like stones at a girl who already carried more weight than most of us ever will. She didn't fall because she was weak, she fell because cruelty pushed her down, and while the bullies laughed, something unexpected happened. The sound of engines replaced the sound of insults. At Santa Monica Pier, hate thought it was winning until a sea of bikers arrived to remind the world what courage, unity, and humanity really look like. Bullying is often dismissed as kids being kids, a moment of bad judgment, or something that just happened. But the truth is far more uncomfortable. Bullying is a deliberate choice. It is not an accident, not a misunderstanding, and not a slip of the tongue. Every insult, every shove, every cruel laugh requires a decision to ignore another person's humanity. And that decision reveals character. In the moment those bullies kicked a disabled girl at Santa Monica Pier, they were not confused, they were not unaware. They saw her vulnerability and consciously decided to exploit it. They chose words meant to wound, they chose actions meant to humiliate. That is not impulsive behavior, it is intentional cruelty, and when society excuses it as a mistake, we quietly teach bullies that they will not be held accountable. Calling bullying a mistake shifts responsibility away from the person causing harm and places it on circumstances, emotions, or peer pressure. But pressure does not remove responsibility, it reveals values. When someone is angry and chooses violence, or amused and chooses mockery, they are showing us who they are in that moment. Kindness under comfort is easy. Kindness under temptation to dominate is real character. Bullies often justify their actions by claiming they were joking, trying to impress others, or acting without thinking. Yet humor that relies on another person's pain is not humor. It is aggression in disguise. Impressing others by tearing someone down is not confidence. It is insecurity looking for approval, and not thinking does not erase the harm done. It only exposes a lack of empathy. Understanding bullying as a choice matters because choices can be challenged, confronted, and changed. If bullying were truly accidental, there would be no need for consequences, education, or intervention. But because it is intentional, it must be addressed with clarity and firmness. Accountability is not about punishment alone. It is about making it clear that cruelty is unacceptable and that better choices are expected. When we name bullying for what it is, a conscious decision, we empower victims by validating their pain, and we challenge perpetrators to take responsibility. Only then can we begin to break the cycle of harm that turns public spaces, schools, and online communities into arenas of fear rather than places of safety. Disability is often misunderstood as a limitation of strength, independence, or value. Society has long attached false assumptions to physical or cognitive differences, equating disability with helplessness, but this belief is not only inaccurate, it is deeply harmful. Disability does not mean weakness. In many cases, it reflects a level of resilience, endurance, and inner strength that most people never have to develop. The disabled girl at Santa Monica Pier was not weak because she moved differently or required support. What made her vulnerable in that moment was not her disability, but the cruelty of those who chose to target her. Physical ability does not determine dignity, and mobility does not define courage. Strength is not measured by how fast someone walks or how hard they can hit. It is measured by how much they endure and still continue forward. Living with a disability often requires navigating a world that is not designed with inclusion in mind. Everyday tasks, using public spaces, accessing transportation, or simply moving through a crowd, can demand constant awareness and effort. That reality builds patience, adaptability, and mental toughness. These are forms of strength that rarely receive recognition, yet they shape character far more than physical dominance ever could. Bullies mistake difference for weakness because they equate power with control. They believe strength comes from the ability to overpower someone else. In truth, that mindset reveals fragility, not force. A person who must target someone more vulnerable to feel powerful is exposing their own insecurity. Real strength does not seek easy targets, it protects them. Disability also does not erase awareness or emotion. When someone is mocked, shoved, or dehumanized, they feel the full weight of that harm. Suggesting that a disabled person is used to it, or less affected, is another form of cruelty. Pain does not lessen because a body is different. If anything, repeated mistreatment demands greater emotional resilience just to keep going. Recognizing that disability does not equal weakness forces society to confront its own failures. The problem is not disabled bodies. It is environments, attitudes, and behaviors that exclude and harm. When people are attacked because they are perceived as weak, it exposes how poorly strength has been defined. Compassion, endurance, self-respect, and the will to exist openly despite adversity are all profound expressions of power. To see disability clearly is to understand that strength takes many forms. Some strength lifts heavy objects. Other strength carries years of obstacles without surrender. The latter is quieter, but it is no less formidable. Silence is often mistaken for neutrality, but in moments of cruelty, silence is a decision, and it almost always favors the aggressor. When bullying happens in public spaces, the harm is not caused only by those who throw the insults or deliver the kicks, but also by the many who watch, hesitate, and say nothing. Silence creates a shield around cruelty, allowing it to continue unchecked. At Santa Monica Pier, the bullies acted with confidence because they believed no one would stop them. That belief did not come from courage, it came from expectation. Too often, people assume someone else will intervene, or they convince themselves it is not their place to get involved. This hesitation gives bullies exactly what they want: freedom without consequence. Silence sends a powerful message to the victim. It tells them they are alone. It suggests their pain is not important enough to interrupt someone else's comfort. For a person already being targeted, the absence of support can hurt as deeply as the attack itself. Being ignored while suffering reinforces shame and fear, making the world feel unsafe and hostile. Many people stay silent out of fear of escalation, embarrassment, or becoming a target themselves. These fears are human and understandable, but they do not erase responsibility. Courage does not mean the absence of fear. It means choosing to act despite it. Even small actions, calling for help, standing nearby, speaking a few words, can disrupt cruelty and shift the balance of power. Silence also normalizes harmful behavior. When insults go unchallenged, they begin to feel acceptable. When violence is ignored, it becomes easier to repeat. Over time, this creates a culture where abuse is expected and empathy is optional. Bullies learn that there are no consequences, and victims learn that protection is unlikely. Breaking silence does not always require confrontation. It requires presence. Standing with the person being targeted, drawing attention, or involving authorities can be enough to stop harm. What matters is refusing to let cruelty happen unseen and unanswered. When people choose silence, they unknowingly protect the wrong side of history. But when they choose to speak, or simply to stand, they remind everyone watching that cruelty is not normal, not acceptable, and not invisible. Fear thrives in isolation. Bullies rely on it, counting on the idea that individuals standing alone will feel too small, too intimidated, or too uncertain to respond. This is why acts of cruelty often happen in groups and in public spaces, because aggressors believe the crowd will remain fragmented and passive. Unity shatters that expectation. When people come together, fear loses its grip. At Santa Monica Pier, the power dynamic changed the moment individuals stopped acting alone and began acting together. One person stepping forward might have been ignored or threatened, but when many stood as one, the balance shifted instantly. Unity sent a clear message: this person is not alone, and harm will not be tolerated. The bully's confidence collapsed, not because of violence, but because of collective presence. Unity does something fear cannot survive. It replaces uncertainty with strength. Fear whispers, "What if I make it worse?" Unity answers, "You don't have to face this alone." When people stand together, responsibility is shared, courage multiplies, and the risk that once felt overwhelming becomes manageable. What seemed impossible for one becomes achievable for many. There is also a psychological power in unity. A united group creates visibility and accountability. Aggressors depend on anonymity and confusion. Unity removes both. When a group acts with purpose, it becomes clear who is protecting and who is harming. This clarity often stops cruelty without a single word needing to be spoken. Unity is not about numbers alone, it is about intention. Even a small group, when aligned in purpose, can overpower fear. What matters is the shared decision to act rather than observe. Unity transforms bystanders into allies and turns vulnerable moments into protected ones. Fear asks people to protect themselves first. Unity asks people to protect what is right. History repeatedly shows that progress, justice, and safety are achieved not by isolated bravery, but by collective action. When people come together, fear no longer decides the outcome, values do. Unity reminds us that while fear may be natural, it is never unbeatable. When people stand shoulder to shoulder, fear retreats and humanity steps forward. Society often imagines heroes as extraordinary figures, people with special powers, official authority, or public recognition. But moments like the one at Santa Monica Pier remind us that true heroes are ordinary people who choose to act when it matters most. Heroism is not a title, it is a decision made in a critical moment. The bikers who surrounded the disabled girl did not arrive as symbols or celebrities. They came as individuals with their own lives, responsibilities, and risks. They did not know her personally, and they had nothing to gain, yet they chose involvement over indifference. That choice is what defines heroism, not strength, not image, not reputation. True heroes rarely announce themselves. They don't wait for permission or applause. They see injustice and recognize a simple truth. If no one steps in, harm continues. In that moment, doing nothing becomes a greater risk than doing something. This quiet sense of responsibility separates heroes from spectators. Heroism also does not always look dramatic. It can be standing near, by so someone feels safe. It can be speaking a firm word, calling for help, or refusing to leave. These actions may seem small, but in moments of fear, they can change everything. For the person being targeted, even one ally can restore dignity and hope. What makes ordinary people capable of extraordinary courage is empathy. Heroes imagine themselves in the victim's place and refuse to accept a world where cruelty goes unchallenged. They understand that safety is not a personal privilege but a shared responsibility. When we limit heroism to rare or exceptional individuals, we excuse ourselves from action. But when we recognize that heroes are everyday people, the standard changes. Anyone can become one. The question is not whether we have the power, it is whether we have the will. True heroes don't wear capes. They wear whatever they happen to have on the day they chose to stand up. There is a critical difference between a crowd and a circle. A crowd watches, a circle protects. In moments of injustice, many people gather, observe, and remain emotionally distant, convincing themselves that presence alone is enough. But being there is not the same as standing with someone. Protection begins when observation turns into action. At Santa Monica Pier, the turning point was not attention, it was formation. When people physically and intentionally surrounded the disabled girl, they transformed the space around her. The circle created safety where fear had existed. It sent a message to the aggressors that access was no longer available, and that harm would not be tolerated. A circle changes power without requiring violence. The crowd mindset is rooted in diffusion of responsibility. When many people are present, individuals feel less accountable. Everyone waits for someone else to act. This hesitation allows cruelty to continue. The circle mindset rejects that delay. It is the moment someone decides, I will not wait. I will step in. Being the circle does not require dominance or confrontation. It requires presence, awareness, and intention. Standing close, offering reassurance, and creating a barrier, physical or emotional, can be enough to stop an attack. These actions communicate solidarity, and solidarity restores dignity to those who have been targeted. Choosing the circle also reshapes social norms. When others see people step forward, it encourages them to do the same. Courage is contagious. One person moving closer often inspires another, and then another, until protection becomes collective. This is how fear loses momentum. The circle is not only a response to crisis, it is a statement of values. It says that safety matters, that dignity is non-negotiable, and that no one deserves to be isolated in their worst moment. While crowds blend into the background, circles stand out as acts of moral clarity. In every situation where someone is being harmed, there is a choice: remain part of the crowd or become part of the circle. One watches history happen, the other helps shape it. What happened at Santa Monica Pier was more than a single act of cruelty interrupted by courage. It was a mirror held up to all of us. It showed how quickly humanity can fail, and how just as quickly it can be restored. In one moment, a girl was reduced to a target. In the next, she was surrounded by protection, dignity, and solidarity. This story forces us to confront a simple truth: moments like these are not rare. They happen every day in different forms in different places. The difference is not the presence of cruelty, but the presence of people willing to challenge it. When individuals choose empathy over comfort and action over hesitation, they redefine what society stands for. We cannot control when injustice appears, but we can control how we respond. Each choice to speak, to stand, to surround, adds weight to the kind of world we are building. Courage does not always roar. Sometimes it simply steps forward and refuses to look away. The legacy of that day is not the cruelty that began it, but the unity that ended it. And that legacy lives on every time someone decides that dignity is worth defending, that silence is not an option, and that no one should ever face harm alone.